Good evening and welcome to Newport News Church of Christ. So delighted that you're here with us to continue in our Wednesday evening Bible study as we continue with our study of the life of Christ, looking at the healing of the demon-possessed boy and the lack of faith this evening. So we're looking at the healing of the demon-possessed boy. Brother Wendell Johnson did a fantastic job on Sunday dealing with the transfiguration. That is recorded in the three gospel accounts in Mark in Matthew 17, Mark 9, and also Luke chapter 9. And he looked at the transfiguration. One of the things, the questions he kind of raised, and I was thinking about it, this coming up to this lesson, we find the people that he took with him. Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him as he went up on the mount. And we know other times when he healed one of the healings, he healed the I think centurion's daughter. He pushed everybody out of the house, had Peter, James, and John. And so Wendell kind of had the brother Johnson that asked the question about, is there significance to those three, Peter, James, and John? I say yes. What saith the class? Significance of Peter, James, and John. Why those three? We know John's his best friend, the one that he loved the most. Why Peter, James, and John? Why those three? I thought about it. Okay, all right. Peter is going to usher in the gospel dispensation, his preaching on the day of Pentecost. Also his work as preaching to the Jews and also the first Gentile converts with the house of Cornelius. Okay, so and then he also made the great confession, that Jesus was a Christ. Okay, so we understand why Peter, why James. Okay, first martyr, and why John. Okay, so yes. So each of these people, now, first of all, Peter, James, and John make up the inner core of Jesus's disciples. Why were they the inner core? They were the first ones that he called. First one he calls Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. Then he called what? James and the son of Zebedee and John. They're the first ones. They're there. That's Matthew chapter 4. Then Matthew chapter 5 begins the Beatitudes. So they were there for part of what goes on before the other ones were called. What's also unique about those guys, those four? They're all fishermen. Their occupation, they're fishermen. I'm gonna make you fishermen. So they're fishermen. They're part of the inner core because, in a situation, the ones that you call first sometimes are what end up kind of being the ones. They're in on the ground floor. They're the ones that Jesus started out with, the very first one called. Doesn't mean that he didn't love the other disciples or the apostles just as much, but they're the inner core. They're the first ones. I don't think it's an accident that those guys get called first. I don't think it's an accident that they're with them significant apart. When we look at what happened, Peter, we have great remarks by Peter. Thou art the Christ. We believe in John chapter 6. We believe, and I'll see in just a second. We believe and are sure. So we have great statements by Peter. Also, we have some great conundrums from Peter, but we have some great statements from Peter that stand up. You love me, feed thy sheep, feed my sheep. So we have some great things from Peter. Peter's going to usher. If we have to say the leader of the 12, who is it? It's Peter. Because, Peter's the one, he's the most outspoken. He's the one that speaks up. So kind of the leader, it's not John. John is what? He's a little more shy, kind of with the Lord. Peter he's a spokesman. We agree. He's the one that opens his mouth first. He's the spokesman of the 12. All right. He will stand up on, and then Jesus says after the great confession, he gave him what? The keys to the kingdom. Whatsoever thou loose on earth shall be loose in heaven. What thou bound on earth be bound in heaven. So he kind of sets Peter up. He's going to stand up and give that great oratory, that address on the day of Pentecost, which the day of Pentecost brings in the kingdom, ushers in the gospel age. The Mosaical age the Mosaical age dies out with Jesus on the cross, but the gospel age comes in 5 weeks later with the beginning of the church and the kingdom. So that's Peter's significant. the first martyr, first one of the disciples to be martyred. James will also be what? What else does James do? What else is his role? James is an elder in the church in Jerusalem. So he's a foundation. They call him one of the pillars of the Jerusalem church. James is an elder in Jerusalem. Remember, Paul comes back and says, Who saw me? Who's the only one that saw me? James. Nobody came because everybody was scared of him. The only person that came to see him was James. James, one of the pillars of the churches of the church in Jerusalem. All right. John, the disciple that he loves the most, the one he outlives everybody, lives into the 90s. And so John will write the what? The last words of the canon. The epistles of John and the Revelation will be the last words that go into the last things that go into the canon. So we bookend. Peter begins the gospel dispensation. John ends the age of revelation with his last writings, his book, his epistles, and his revelation ends the what? The revelation God at sundry times spoke through the prophets and through the apostles. So that ends that inspired period of writing, ends with John at the end of the first century. So I think that if you look at that, that shows some significance of those three guys. They're in the inner court. They're with, Christ from the very beginning, the only four, along with Andrew, Peter's brother, that are with him from the beginning, before even the Sermon on the Mountain. And then we see the significant things that Peter did. James, the martyr, elder in the church in Jerusalem, and then John, his writings will end what we have in our canon. So that's just a little hangover from what Brother Wendell did as he was talking about the transfiguration. And so as we look at our lesson today, what are the things we're going to look at the event that happens right after the transfiguration. But I want you to put in your mind that in life, we have mountaintop experiences and we have valleys, mountains and valleys. We don't all have mountains. Every life is not all a mountaintop. Like mountaintop represents joy and peace and exhilaration and success. The valley represents what? Some downtime, some despair, some downtime. What did David say in the 23rd Psalms about the valley? He called it the valley of the shadow. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. And you look at the shepherd. The shepherd leads the sheep to what? When it's hot in the summer, he leads them to the mountains where it's a little cooler, where they can have that table they graze on the mountains, but then they have to go back down in the valley. What's in the valley for the shepherd? There's danger in the valley. There's all the animals, all the predators. You got to be on the lookout in the valley, but you got to go through the valley because you have a mountain, you have a valley, and you have another mountain. So you come from one mountain peak, you have to go through the valley then to get up to another mountain peak. So in life, we have mountaintop experiences and we have valley experiences. So now Jesus and Peter, James, and John have just come from a mountaintop experience with the transfiguration. Very exhilarating. We have the cloud, the snow-capped mountain, the cloud wrapping them, the voice from heaven coming down, confirming, hey, Peter, slow up. This is my son who I'm well pleased, hear him, listen to him. He's the one. So we have that again, that confirmation of Christ in that event. So a fantastic event. Of course, Christ tells them, don't discuss this. All right. And so that was in our last lesson. But as soon as they come down from the mountain period, what do they run into? Confusion. The disciples are in trouble. The apostles are in trouble. The scribes are arguing with them. You have some confusion. Then you have a demon-possessed a child. So that's as we come out of the valley. And so when you think about that, it's also reminiscent of another mountain scene. Moses, he goes into Mount Sinai to receive the law from God, the 10 Commandments, but what's going down in the camp? Chaos, sins going on. They're down there, they're bored. Did they think Moses was coming back? They didn't know. We don't know if Moses is coming back. We don't know what's happening to Moses. Has Moses been gone for a while? Yeah, Moses been gone for a while. So all of a sudden they lose faith. They're like, well, we don't know if Moses coming back. What's going on? It's like the parent is away, the kids decide to play. Let's do our own thing. Let's make something that we can worship. So the scene with Moses is interrupted because the Lord says, what? Moses, you better get back down the mountain. There's what? Sin in the camp. Moses, look, Moses, let's wrap this up. You got to get back down there. You got troubles down here. The Lord says, you got some troubles down in the camp. So again, on the mountaintop, exhilaration, Moses communing with God. He's writing with his own hand the word that would be the 10 commandments that he would take and give to his people. The people are down there sinning. So Moses comes back down just like a parent. You go out of the house and you come back home. What do you find? Things tore up. Somebody broke a lamp. Who did it? The stuff that you told them to do, they didn't do. They didn't wash the clothes. They didn't wash the dishes. And so you come home. The parents have had a nice evening out, went to dinner. Daisha come home and the house is tore up. What's going on? What's going on? And so that's the mountain valley experience. And so that's what's going to happen with the Lord today. He's going to try his patience. He's going to come down out of the mountain, a great sea. He's going to come down and there's chaos waiting for him at the bottom of the mountain. And so we see this moment with Peter, James, and John as they descend from the mountain. Of course, they have a little conversation as they're coming down the mountain and where they were talking about kind of what happened. Jesus tells them, don't tell anybody. So today we look at if someone asked you to tell them about your faith, how would you answer it? We know there's several good scriptures that help us with our faith. If we looked at Romans 1:16, Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ with his power of God unto salvation to the Jew first, also to the Greek. For therein is what the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. So from a lesser standard of faith to a higher standard of faith, or some writers say from first to last is faith to faith, from first to last. And so we live by faith, and God's righteousness begins and ends faith. The Bible also has some other stuff to say. Hebrews 11:6, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because he that cometh must not only come, but he must come to God, but he must believe that he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Paul would tell us in Ephesians 2:8, by grace ye are saved through faith. We walk the Christian pathway, as Paul would say in 2 Corinthians 5:7. We walk by faith and not by sight. Faith is a shield that protects us, as he talked about putting on the whole armor of God in Ephesians 6:16. And so faith is our shield. Faith is the victory that overcomes the world. The John the beloved, right? And 1 John 5:4. Faith is the victory that overcomes the world. And we sing a beautiful hymn. Faith is the victory. The ultimate outcome of faith will be the salvation of our souls, 1 Peter 1:9. So we have a lot of things that talk, a lot of beautiful scriptures that talk about faith. We asked a question tonight: is your faith strong, and where it needs is strong, and where it needs to be at all times? And the answer to that is what? Of course not. Of course, our faith is not as strong as it needs to be, and where it needs to be, because what? We all struggle. Romans 3:20, the book, for we all have what? Sin and fallen short of glory of God. Yes, Brother Mike. Yes, yes, yep, yep. And so yes, our faith is, our comment to that would, yes, we're all striving to get better, and you don't know until what? You don't know about your faith until what happens. Test it. I'm sorry, Brother Emmett, you had something I mean to. Yes, sir. All right. Yeah. So we talk about that's John the Baptist, his cousin. This is John, son of Zebedee. But yeah. These are all three guys. Yeah, you're very good point. These all are kind of the foundation that, like I say, they're the kind of the inner core that were called first. So So yeah, so we don't know about our faith until what? Till we hit some trials. When we hit some trials, then we find out what? How strong really is our faith? We might go and think our faith is strong, but then we get hit with this trial, and then we realize like, oh, I need to tighten up my faith. I need to build up my faith a little bit more. Just like with our bodies and what they're able to do and our muscles, we can think they're strong, but then when we run into something that's a little heavier or an obstacle that's a little much, then we realize, no, my body, at one point in time, all of us was in that state where we were trying to do a lot of stuff to build up, to be able to do those things. Now we're just trying to maintain what we have and make sure we have enough to do what we need to do every day. But we don't know until we struggle and face some struggles. And so we're going to read of a time when apparently the apostles' faith was struggling. Jesus came down the mountain only to find the people he had been training nonstop were still lacking in the very important point of faith. Let's look at Mark 9, 14 through 29. And so all throughout these lessons, what have we seen over and over again with Jesus and his apostles, the people he'd been training? What's been happening to them time and time again? One of the reoccurring things is what? Jesus shaking his head like, oh, you little faith. He gave them a couple of tests on the water. He sent them out by themselves, and then he came walking on the water to them. What did he say? Oh, you have little faith. Then the other time he was in the boat with them. He was tired. That was after his long day. He went to sleep. Storm came up. They all in a panic woke him up. Master, master. Oh, ye of little faith. So they had 2 water tests that they failed. They had 2 food tests that they failed. The 5,000. What brother, what we gonna do? Send them away, Jesus. Send them away. We'll have no food out here. We're out here. There's no place for them to go and eat. Just send them home. What do you have? Well, at the 5,000, we don't have enough denarii to buy them enough bread for all them to feed. All right, Jesus, little lad. John tells us about the lad with the 2 fishes and the 5 barley loaves. He feeds everybody. Not shortly after that, they're on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And again, the 4,000. Send them away, Lord. They've been with him 3 days. Jesus, we got to feed them. Send them away, Lord. They're in a deserted place, no place to eat. These people had food, ran out of food. Send them away. Send them away. Again, did you guys just remember that the Lord, they feed them over here? No. So again, over and over, it's been the guys he's been training, but they just keep coming up short because of what? Their faith, because of their faith. So again, we see that in this story today, another time that kind of illustrates their faith. And so we look at the story. Let's look at Mark 9, and then we'll look at verses 14 and 15. I'll read in the ESV. And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him and asked him, and what are you? And he asked them, what are you arguing about? So a familiar scene, there was a great crowd made up of scribes who were arguing with Jesus. Who been the nemesis with Jesus so far? We've had the what? Pharisees. Then finally the Pharisees, then the Sadducees showed up, and then them 2 guys were kind of working together. And the Pharisees and Sadducees, do they like each other? Nope, they're like the Democrats and the Republicans. They do not like each other, but all of a sudden they were kind of working together because what? Who's their common enemy? The Lord. He's threatening their popularity. So the Sadducees and Pharisees, and they've come up from where? They've come up from Jerusalem because of what they've heard, and he's threatening their position. So they've come up, and so now we've got the scribes. The scribes or the other group are now arguing with them. So we got another scene, another one of Jesus's nemesis are there arguing with the disciples, with Jesus' disciples. All right, and the crowd saw Jesus and ran up to him. So the crowd had kind of been anticipating. I think they had seen Jesus, and Jesus has been followed our recent lessons. Jesus, what's he trying to do in these recent lessons? He's trying to stay out of sight. He's trying to be incognito. He's trying to leave Herod's territory, just trying to spend some time with his disciples because his Galilean ministry is about to be over. After this episode, we're going to see him start to point his way toward Jerusalem. So he's going to start to make his way toward Jerusalem. So after this, he's got to go through Samaria, and then he's going to be heading toward Jerusalem because he's coming up to what? The final showdown, the final countdown, the of his mission. So, but people have been trying to find him and been tracking him and sightings of Jesus. So we have a crowd there that's gathered, and they ran up to him and wanted to see him during this time. We have a feeble boy that is mentioned, Mark 16 through 18. And he asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." All right. So this man has brought his son and to Jesus, and his disciples were not able to cast the demon out of him. The demon was causing the boy a lot of pain. The demon is Jesus will call him a deaf and a mute demon. Is causing the boy a lot of pain. He's grinding his teeth, falling on the ground, foaming at the mouth. It hurts the young man. It runs him into water and it throws him down into fire. And so he's not able to speak. The demons throwing him to the ground, and he would lie writhing and grinding his teeth and foaming at the mouth, falling into fire or water. And his father said the demon's purpose was to destroy his son. The father made it clear that Jesus' disciples could not cast out the demon, as we saw in Mark 9:18. And the father said, and whenever it seizes him, it throws him down and he foams at the mouth. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able to. All right. And so that's the kind of setting there. We're going to see Jesus, a frustrated teacher. Jesus, a frustrated teacher. Look at verse 19. Verse 19. And he answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." So Jesus is like, we see before when before one of the stories before, when Jesus, this kind of thing, this stuff comes to Jesus, he just kind of sighs like, man, this again. And so Jesus like, how long am I going to be with you? How long I'm going to bear with you? What does Jesus know? What's the answer to that question that Jesus knows that they don't know? Jesus knows it's going out. So he's, getting probably a little frustrated. He knows what? Not long. So really it's kind of a rhetorical question, but they don't know it, but Jesus knows it. How long I'm going to bear with you? Jesus knows not long. Jesus knows I'm not going to have much time to bear with, how long, oh faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? Not long. How long am I to bear with you? Not long. So Jesus says what? Bring him to me. Jesus said, bring man to me. We're reminded of Jesus' human side here. We see his humanity in the fact that what? Jesus showed a little frustration. He's not necessarily angry with his disciples. He's just what? Frustrated, because they've seen enough to understand, to get it, but guess what? They still quite don't get it. And so you can hear in his voice his longing to go be with his Father in heaven. Jesus knows his time is running out. Jesus, that rhetorical question, how long I'm going to be with you? Jesus knows not long. Jesus knows that every day he's taking another step toward Jerusalem, toward Calvary, toward fulfilling his mission on the cross to be with his Father. In fact, just before on the Mount of Transfiguration, Brother Wendell, what was he doing up there? Disciples fell asleep. What's he doing on the mountain? He's in. But he's there to pray to the Father, talk to the Father. And then he has a conversation with Moses and Elijah. The other three that are there fall asleep and wake up and see this fantastic scene. But we see Jesus, getting away, spending some time in prayer, talking to the Father. So Jesus is longing for his time to fulfill this mission and go be with the Father. So you can hear his longing to be with his Father. You can see his human side, a little of the frustration of what he's been trying to teach, but not having his students, get the message. You can also hear the concern in his voice about the preparation of his disciples. How, it's like, how long I'm going to be with you? I'm trying to get you guys ready, but I'm not going to be with you very long. And so you can kind of hear that. Jesus asked about the boy's condition, not because he needed to know, but because the Father needed to understand his hopelessness without Christ. So we look at verse 20. Look at verse 20, verse 19, and he answered them. So, all right, so verse 20, and they brought the boy to him, and when the Spirit saw him, immediately he convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood, and it has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. All right. So Jesus knowing everything, Jesus knows the situation, but Jesus asked to what? To press upon fire. How long has this been going on? For the Father to recount, this has been happening how long to this boy? His whole life. So the situation is what? Pretty hopeless. It's been happening to him his whole life. And the Father says that, if you can do anything, and if you can do anything, help. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us, is what the Father says. So the Father's expressing his what? His helplessness. This has been going on with the boy his whole life. And so now he's helpless. And Jesus asked this to impress upon him the helplessness that we have without Christ. There was no answer for this boy without Christ. We find the faltering father in Matthew and Mark chapter 9, verses 21 through 24 as we continue on. And verse we just read, verse 21. And it is often cast him into the fire, but if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for one who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. So the father was faltering. He said, I believe, but help my unbelief. What did the Father mean by this? Help my unbelief. I believe, but help my unbelief. What do you think the Father's expressing here in this statement? I believe, but help my unbelief. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yeah, Brother Mike. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Okay. All right. So let's go back and unpack what you just said. You said a lot. So first of all, the disciples or the apostles are the representatives of Jesus. And so they have kind of, they were out there and couldn't do it. And so they're representing Christ. So they're what kind of making what? Exactly. It's almost as if, well, is there any real power to help my son? Because we came to your disciples and they couldn't do it. Yes. Yep. Yep. Brother Bob? Yeah, yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Yes, yeah. All right, and so now, Brother Winter. Well, okay, yeah. Oh, we can say that, he's probably heard about the fame of Christ has spread abroad. So he's certainly coming to, with hopes that Christ can do something for his child, for his son. So yes, he has a lot of anticipation. He's coming. Unfortunately, he's running to the disciples who couldn't do it. But let's think back. Just recently, we talked about what the limited commission. In the limited commission, he gave the disciples, the apostles, power what? Over spirits. And yeah, and so they he gave them power over the spirits, and when they came back and reported what happened, he said, "Hey, we have power over unclean spirits." And Jesus said, don't marvel. Don't get caught up in the fact that you have power over spirits, but be more impressed or be more excited about the fact that is your name written in heaven. So again, what in our day and time, what do people get caught up in? Works. The fact that they can work and so here's another kind of rebuke on that even Jesus said that's not important. What's important is your name written in heaven. So he told the disciples, don't, and so what happens here, because they did have some success, what happens when young learners or young people that, have some ability, get some success? They kind of maybe get over exaggerated, get the big head, like, oh, we got powers over spirits. We can go do it anytime. And Jesus said, hold it. You better make sure your name, you be more impressed with your name written in heaven. Don't get all caught up in the fact that you have powers over unclean. So you can kind of get a false sense of security here. Yes, brother. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, God is still in control. So maybe the disciples, maybe they get a little false sense of security. Yes, brother Bob. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Okay, very good. So, Bob, very good. So, what they have power over, what they were able to do, they were able to go over some smaller hurdles. This possession is a bigger hurdle, so they can't go over it. So, guess what happens when we try to do something? We think we can do it, but then we get something we can't do. What happens? We begin to get more frustrated and more frustrated and more frustrated. All right. Like me and brother Dennis, when we bowl a good game and the next game we can't do nothing. We're like, man, what's going on, man? We just bowled 150 and then we bowl, what happened? It's just we get a bigger hurdle. So we start to lose some faith and confidence in our own abilities, because we just did it. So that's the disciples. And so we'll get a hint of this because Jesus is going to call it out and say, he's going to tell them, well, we'll get to that. Let's wait. Let Jesus tell us when we get to that part. He's going to tell us why, because they're going to ask him why. So let's not preview that first. So yeah, so they run into a thing. And so, yeah, but the thing we're concentrating on the Father, run it. The disciples have jumped out there probably with that confidence. Jesus is up in the mountain. So they come to the disciples and they're like, oh man, yeah, bring the boy here. We'll take care of this. This is a different type of possession. They can't do it. And then guess what? Who's on the sideline? See, you thought y'all were Jesus. And so the scribes coming in there. And so now this whole scene's coming on because the scribes are calling them out, and the apostles are probably going more vehemently, trying to go all of this. And the scribes are calling them out. Don't remember Mark Carmel and Elijah. What did Elijah do with those the false prophets of Baal? Because they were working hard, and he kept calling them out. Where's your God? Is your God asleep? Maybe your God asleep. You're in the bathroom, and they start cutting themselves and going all vehemently because they trying to really do this, and so it is kind of maybe the similar thing. These guys felt a little tinge here. They're getting a little embarrassed because the scribes are calling them out, and then and so now Jesus comes out. We came to your boys. Your boys couldn't do it, but if you can do it, Jesus said, well, do you believe? He said, I believe, but help my unbelief, man, because I don't have no confidence after I just seen your disciples fail. Do you really have the power of God? Can you really do these things? So this is where the Father's coming from. The Father's like, I believe, but help my unbelief. But as we started to see, we talked, and I think I taught the lesson, at a certain point, all the healings and the miracles shift, and they start to accentuate or start to show what Jesus starts to really pull out what the faith of the person being healed. With the woman and the issue of blood, what was it? Your faith made you whole. The men that cut a hole in the roof and let their friend down, what did Jesus? Their faith, because what they did. The Roman centurion, I haven't seen such a greater faith even in Israel, because this man said, you don't know, no, Lord, you don't have to come to my house. I know you could just say it, because I'm a man of power. I say go and people go. I say come and people come. I know you have great power that if you say it and speak it, it'll be done. Jesus like, boy, I haven't seen that kind of faith in it. So these stories in these narratives illustrate the faith of the person that's being healed. What is their faith? Is there, because Jesus, he's the acting agent, but what is it? It's your faith. It's the faith. How bad do you want it? How much faith do you have in the Lord to do this? And their faith, what? Along with what the Lord's ability, what helps to activate it. So it's a thing that comes together. And so, Lord, so the Father here is faltering here because he's seeing what his disciples do. And so we see some fail to see the problem with this statement, but what's the issue with what he said? He said, Jesus, if you could do anything, the man obviously doubted the power of Jesus, and likely due to the failure, like we've all just kind of said, of his disciples. So let's look at Jesus' response in verse 23. Verse 23, Jesus says, and Jesus said unto him, if you can, all things are possible for ones who believe. Jesus said, if you can hear the Lord's rebuke of the Father's faith. Jesus said that all things are possible if you believe. You must believe. Remember when he comes on the scene with Mary and Martha, and their brother's been gone, already in the grave, stinking. They're thinking, Lord, if you had been here, our brother would have died. The Lord said, do you believe that you'll see your brother again? Oh, yes, Lord, we believe in the resurrection. We'll see our brother. No, do you believe your brother right now that you're about to see your brother? So again, the faith. Jesus comes to test the faith. Jesus says all things are possible if you believe. You must believe. You see the Father's request in verse 24, and immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, but help my unbelief. First, the father said he believed, but I think he said something powerful next when he said, help my unbelief. Yes, so there was part of him, but help my unbelief. So now if you look at us and you look at like percentage, at any time, there's maybe a certain percentage of us that believe, but then we have a certain percent that maybe where there's a little doubt, a little faltering, unbelief. So it seems like the father maybe had 40% belief, but what? 60% was unbelief. He said, I need help with this 60% because I believe, but 60% unbelief. And so for even with us, Can we up that quotient to where we get it to where our belief is 100%? And sometimes, yeah, and in life, there's something that we're skeptical like, yeah, I believe, but I still got little doubts, Brother Bob. Yeah, I believe that they could do this. Yeah, Brother Bob, I don't want to pick on you, but I believe the Steelers can pull it together, but I got a lot of doubts, Brother Bob. Lot of doubts. Lot of doubts. I believe. I trust your coach, but I got a lot of doubts about what I've been seeing on the field. See, so it's that kind of thing to illustrate, And so the father, he said, yeah, I got some belief, but what the greatest part of him was what? Unbelief. So he said, this is what I need help with. I need with this greater part is this unbelief that I don't have because, I've been kind of let down from what I've seen from the disciples. And so, yes, Brother Mike. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Child. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. And I think you have to look at it's that help my unbelief is not a negative statement because sometimes guess what? We have unbelief, but what we don't do, we won't admit it. We've got part of us that have some unbelief, but guess what? Because we don't want to be seem like we don't have unbelief, we won't admit it. At least the father said, help my unbelief. He at least cried out because he admitted, hey, I believe, but help my unbelief here. Help my unbelief here. And so Jesus is going to help his unbelief by what? The miracle he's about to accomplish. So you have to look at the Father. At least he was open with what I got belief, but help my under part of me that doesn't believe. Increase, Lord, increase. Yeah. And Jesus' answer is like, you don't need more faith. You just need to trust the faith you have. You don't need to. So we look at, though they were looking at quantity, Lord, give us more. And Jesus is going to say, yeah, more than enough. You're not using, if you would just use what you have, as he's going to give us the illustration, you could do some great things if you just totally had 100% behind, even a little bit. If you had 100% belief behind it, you could do great things. So I don't have to give you more faith. You just need to use what you have. Yes, brother. Yes, that may. Yep, and I believe this is what happens to the disciples. The because of that early success. Hey, we can cast out. They have faith over spirits, and Jesus said, "Don't get so enamored with your ability to cast out fear. You be more worried about is your name written in heaven." But they probably didn't take that to heart, so they got out here in this situation, thought, "Oh, we can handle this," and then they got knocked down, and so now they have unbelief too. The Father at least mentioned, "Lord, help my unbelief," but it looks like they have a little unbelief too because, and then doesn't help that the scribes are calling them out. So let's look at this, the demonstration, what the Lord does in verse 25 through verse 27. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, verse 25, and when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit. So now this is drawing a crowd. Yes, Brother Emmett. Mm-hmm. Oh, ye of of little faith. He didn't have complete trust in God, that he could. I mean, he had enough to get him out there, but not enough to completely walk. He took his eyes off the Lord. So again, he talks to the disciples, oh, ye of little faith, or lack of faith, little, not necessarily in size, but just little in lack, just the lack of faith that they had. So he says, your faith is little because it lacks. And so I think we'll see here, in Jesus that, that if you would just, that even with a little faith, if you had 100% of that little faith, you could do great things. And so I think we'll see that here. So Jesus in verse 25, and so Jesus saw the crowd that it came running together. He rebuked the unclean spirit, saying, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you to come out and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, so it looks like the spirit got his last few blows in on the boy, then it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? And he said unto them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. So Jesus hands the boy over to the Father. The demon didn't leave quietly, like I just said. The demon seemed like it convulsed and kind of threw the boy down. But the defeated demon did come out and left the boy looking like a corpse. Jesus handed the boy over to his father and helped the boy to his feet. A special comfort to the father must have been that Jesus commanded the demon what? Don't come back, don't enter again. So the father could have, faith that this demon wasn't going to come back. This wasn't a temporary thing, but that Jesus said, come out, and he said, what? Don't come back again. So we see the power of faith. Christ's disciples asked Jesus why they were not able to cast it out. They may have been casting out demons, so that was not a problem, but Jesus told them the issue. Let's look at Matthew 17, 19, and 21. Matthew 17. Matthew 17, 19, and 21. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like the grain of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. So it's their little faith, their lack of faith is why they couldn't do it. In Mark, he said, this kind only through what? Prayer and fasting. So it typifies that this demon possession was different from the spirits they had cast out before. This spirit was a little more of a test for them. And so Jesus showing that what? We have to be in what? Constant prayer, and for them fasting, they're fasting they would use that time to clean themselves, purify themselves, but that fasting time would be spent in devotion to God. That time they would take away from meeting would be time that they could dedicate totally to the Father in prayer. So you have to be strong in your prayer life and be locked in as Jesus would lock in. Have we not seen him spend time talking to the Father, getting away and spending time with the Father? He sent the disciples out on the ship. He went into the mountain to pray. He took them on the Mount of Transfiguration. So we see Jesus making sure that what? He locks in and spends time with his Father. So he's telling them, hey, you got to be locked in prayer. Now over here in Matthew records that the reason, because of what? Your little faith. Your faith is little. Later on, as Brother Mike said, they're going to ask him what? To give us, Lord, give us more, or Lord, increase our faith. And so does it surprise you that the apostles' faith would be little? They had some faith because they assumed they could cast the demon out, but their faith still was lacking. If you have faith like grain of a mustard seed, and so we look at a mustard seed is small, but it's real. A mustard seed is small, but it's alive. A mustard seed is small, but it has great potential. You know what what the tree looks like that grows out of mustard seed? It starts off, it looks like a small plant, but they can grow pretty big. So out of this little tiny seed comes what? This big old tree that grows out of it. So it has great potential. Mustard seed is small and weak, but it willingly accepts the strength of the soil that surrounds its size. And so the size of faith is not as important as the focus of the faith. The result of the faith is nothing. The result of our faith is nothing that will be impossible. So that's what Jesus is saying. You know, it's the focus of the faith, not how big or how small the disciples were. Increase it. They just needed to rely on that which they have. They had some faith, but they wasn't totally relying on that faith that they could do it. And so Jesus is saying that if you have the faith that just as a size of a mustard seed. Now, is Jesus really telling them that, as some people would assume today, that, oh, we have that kind of faith, we can go literally move mountains? Jesus is not literally telling them to move mountains. Jesus is saying that you'll be able to deal with obstacles, what? That are comparatively like mountains. Don't we use mountains to talk about obstacles? Don't we say, hey, don't we tell people oftentimes they take what? A molehill and turn it into a mountain? You know, don't we do that comparative thing that, we have to move mountains. If the mountain won't come to Muhammad has to go. So we use mountains figuratively. And so Jesus using that we'll be able to deal with obstacles that can be significant. The mountain so looking at the mustard seed is small, a mountain is a great thing. So if we have the faith like this, we'll be able to deal with obstacles that can seem like what? Mountains in our lives, the size of mountains. We're not telling us, so, got a lot of people today will go out and try to take these things literally like we should be able to move mountains. And no, you should be able to do and take care of obstacles that can seem like, so them trying to heal this boy was like a mountain to them because they ran into it and they couldn't do it. And they said, you had little faith. That's what Jesus said. So if you had the faith, if you had the focus in your faith, just a little bit like a mustard, you would have been able to handle that great obstacle, is what Jesus is saying. The result of our faith is nothing that will be impossible, like moving mountains. Did Jesus literally mean we can move dirt and rock? Mountains here represent obstacles. There's nothing you cannot overcome with what? The right amount of faith. Also, Jesus, as in Mark, where he talks about a lack of prayer, we do not need to forget the response in Mark 9:29 either. The disciples' prayer life was not in order. Jesus was not simply saying that they did not pray, and therefore the demon did not come out of the boy. Jesus did not pray before casting out the demon. It appears that the disciples started looking at their what? Their own ability more than what? Depending on God. If you do not have strong prayer life, you are saying to God, I do not need you. I can do it myself. So there's two parts, having the faith, but also what? Having the prayer life. Like I say, they might have got the little big here because earlier when he had sent them out on the limited commission, give them power to heal unclean spirits. And were they successful? Yes. When they came back and reported back to Jesus, said, hey, Jesus, we able to heal unclean. We have control. What did they say? Yeah, we have control over the unclean spirits. Jesus said, hold it. You be more concerned about whether your name's written in heaven about these unclean spirits, because Jesus knew what? There's some other spirits over here you may not be able to control. And so this whole story illustrates a couple of things. The focus of our faith. A lot of times me and Brother Maxwell, people come down and respond, and they'll say, my faith is weak. And why is your faith weak? Because you're not relying on God. Your faith is weak is because what? Your connection with God is weak. Brother Maxwell, your world deals a lot with connectivity. If things are connected, circuits are connected in Brother Maxwell's world, things don't work. Systems don't work. Ship operate. You can have everything all wired up, but it can be a little something like something is not connected. One thing is a circuit is not connected. One wire can be out of place. Guess what, Brother Maxwell? Your whole system is inoperative. If we're not connected to the source, How do we connect to the source? We connect to it in prayer. If we're depending on our own strength, and a lot of times when people coming down, what they're really saying is they've been depending on their own strength and ability. And so their faith is weak. But why? What helps you with faith? Well, number one, you need to get in the word of God. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. So you know, so probably you're not in the word of God as much. And then your prayer life, you're not connecting with the source. And so then that will help you to believe those things that you're reading in scriptures, and praying to God will help you and will help you in your faith. And your faith will and your faith can grow. You can have weak faith or you can have strong faith. And so we look at things in quantity. I don't have enough. I need more. My faith needs to be bigger. No, you have enough. You just need to use what you have. Make sure you're connected to the source. Make sure your faith is focused. Because Jesus said, what? Just a little faith, you can move great obstacles in your life if you have just a little bit of faith. If your faith is focused like this mustard seed, not that, so we don't, but us as humans, we always looking for, well, if I can't do something, I need more of something, or I need it to be greater, because that's how we respond. The disciples, Lord, increase our faith. We need greater faith. Jesus said, no, you don't. You have enough. Just use what you have. Be focused. There's some things you can't do, like he told them, without prayer and fasting. You need to do it with prayer and fasting. You need to be focused and really be 100% in that faith, and you'll be able to accomplish things. Because as we saw here, as the disciples of faced this task, they were there. They thought they could just task based on their past experience, because they had success before. That's what they was basing on, not the fact that Jesus had commissioned them and gave them the power. They were going by, oh, we did this before, we should be able to do it now. And so that can bite us too. That, oh, maybe one time you faced this temptation, you were successful, but the next time you may not be successful if you don't approach it the same way. What? In the spirit, trusting what the word of God says, and what? In prayer and supplication. Everything has to be what? Through the medium of prayer, asking God, hey, help me through this. At least we need to have the humility of the Father. Lord, help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. Help me to be strong. Help me to stand. And then, stand on those things that we've learned from the word of God, plus with our prayer, will help us to be able to what? Move obstacles in our lives and mountains. So this is certainly a great lesson. Any other questions we have in this? This is one that we could just stand to read. And so just Jesus trying to help the disciples, but like we're going to see again, there are going to be a few other teachable moments where the Lord will help them with their faith, help to strengthen. And all of these little failures and ups and downs, all these valleys that the disciples go through is what? Helping their faith, is building their faith, because now when Jesus leaves and they get into the time period where now it's coming on them, you'll see their faith be strong. We'll see them get whipped and beaten and come back out and with joy continue on, I think it's because of these valleys that he took them through as their leader and as their mentor, their shepherd. They went through these valleys. So the same thing for us. We're going to go through some valleys, but these valleys can what? Build our strength. So when we get back on the mountains, we can really enjoy them. So we have to go through these valleys, but they got to be through prayer, and they should be through times that kind of purify our faith, help to strengthen our faith, times where we look back and see, hey, where was my faith weak? Where do I need to shore it up? And how do I shore it up so that next time you be in the valley, you'll be able to survive? Appreciate you being here so much.